The Southern States. These states provide many of the United States' greatest railroading gems. In this video, we chase Southern Railway Heritage Unit number 8099 as it pulls an excursion train from Chattanooga, Tennessee to Attalla, Alabama with one less A than the state's name. We also see other trains along this line. In addition, with the other trains, we also visit other attractions along the line, such as the Alabama Fan Club and Museum in Fort Payne, Alabama. So now, let's continue our journey and go even further south. Today's date is March 29th, 2014, the day after we arrived in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Today, we will be chasing Southern 8099 as it pulls an excursion over the XX Alabama Great Southern X Southern Railway main line from here to Attalla, Alabama and back. It was a very rainy morning as we got going to the TVRM Grand Junction depot. Before we got there, we caught a CSX freight train at the Lightfoot Mill Road railroad crossing. Also nearby, at the crossing, was a very short local, led by CSX 2504, a EMD GP38-2, built 1973, for the Seaboard Coastline Railroad as 504.
Okay.
The reason why we were at the depot was because we were concerned about the train. Originally, we began our day at the Tunnel Boulevard Railroad Bridge on TVRM's main line, expecting the train to go through there. The reason for that was because the day before we left and gone down the rat hole, we had heard that Southern Railway 630 was going to pull this excursion.
Get in a minute, let's go see what's up with the real train.
I know, I'm just looking at the coaches. I'm just looking.
And as we got out of the car, we're now at the Tennessee.
We soon walked in to the Grand Junction station to talk to the staff there about what was going on. As soon as we walked in, I heard a horn and ran outside to see Southern 8099 pulling the train instead.
Where's the steam engine?
It turns out that the day after we left, the engineers at TVRM discovered that 630 had a firebox issue and they couldn't fix it in time for this excursion. So, NS brought in their Heritage Unit 8099 to cover it.
Confused.
After the train passed, we started debating on whether or not we wanted to chase this train. After all, we did come down here to see 630.
We don't live too far from Marion, and we go up to Marion and Astoria.
After walking around the complex in discussion, we decided to go ahead and chase the train. We soon got back on the road for the chase. We then caught the train just north of the Tennessee-Georgia border, just southwest of Chattanooga, Tennessee. After the train crossed the border, we continued the chase into Georgia. From where we caught the train to Trenton, Georgia, the railroad follows pretty closely to the Birmingham Pike / Highway 11 and makes for good pacing territory. Highway 11 follows the line pretty closely, as well as Route 59 in some places.
Dad, you might want to shut the window now.
After pacing the train, we got ahead of it and caught the train in Trenton, Georgia, at the South Industrial Boulevard Railroad crossing. We then crossed the Georgia-Alabama border and arrived in Valley Head, Alabama. Valley Head, Alabama is a small town with a population of 658 people. We pulled over to catch a train run through here. Now that we got a minute, let's talk about the line we are on. This line is Norfolk Southern's AGS North District. AGS North runs from Chattanooga, Tennessee to Birmingham, Alabama, where it meets its counterpart AGS South District, which runs to Meridian, Mississippi. As you might have guessed, AGS stands for Alabama Great Southern. Although the signal just south of us showed a bright green, we waited and waited. Eventually, we concluded that the excursion might have already passed through here, so we decided to go down all the way to Attalla, Alabama to see if it got there. Sure enough, we were right. As we got into town, we caught the excursion train backing down onto the Y to turn around. The train consisted of 14 passenger cars. Going from the rear down, we first see a silver observation car. I wasn't able to get very much information on this car. Then, TVRM 873 came along, followed by GTW BMC 8099, the Silver Lake, and TVRM 3158, the Traveler's Fair. Then, TVRM 857, 907, 661, and 50 came along. The first 6 cars up front are owned by Norfolk Southern. On it was NS-26 to New York, NS-29, NS-28, NS-47 to Louisiana, and NS-46 to New Jersey, and NS-42 to Tennessee. Attalla, Alabama is where NS crosses over the Alabama and Tennessee River Railway, a short-line railroad that runs from Birmingham to Guntersville via Wellington, Alabama, and interchanges with Norfolk Southern here. We then moved to the First Street Railroad crossing. This is where the Y connects to the ANTR interchange. After the train backed down onto the interchange, the switch was set and the train proceeded to pull forward onto the other track to face north. Soon the train came to a stop just before the switch to the AGS North District. The train was scheduled to leave in only 2.5 hours. The reason for the layover was because so passengers could get off and explore the town. Also, I think there was some sort of special event that was happening in town that day, but I couldn't quite find what that event was. We then moved back to 3rd Street, where we caught the excursion pulling in to the Y. This is where we caught a northbound grain train, led by NS 8711, 9593, and 9476. NS 8711 is a GE ES40-8 built in 1991. NS 9593 and 9476 are both GE C40-9Ws. Since this train is taking its time to get out of town, let's talk about the XX Alabama Great Southern Railroad. The AGSR was incorporated in 1877 by Emily Ellinger and Company, a British company. AGS was the successor to the Alabama and Chattanooga Railroad. The ANC was a railroad line that connected Chattanooga, Tennessee to Meridian, Mississippi. In 1881, AGS gained control of the Cincinnati, New Orleans, and Texas Pacific Railroad, aka the Rat Hole Line, which we covered in Volume 2. Also that year, another English company, which operated the New Orleans and Northeastern Railroad, the Vicksburg and Meridian, later Alabama and Vicksburg, and the Vicksburg, Shreveport, and Pacific Railroad, gained control of AGS, along with the C&O NTP. Together, all 5 of these railroad companies made up what was known as the Queen and Crescent Route. The main line was made up of the Cincinnati, New Orleans, and Texas Pacific, the Alabama and Great Southern, and the New Orleans and Northeastern Railroad from Cincinnati, the Queen City, to New Orleans, the Crescent City. The line also had a secondary main line that ran from Meridian to Shreveport over the A&V and the VS&P. Then in 1890, control of the AGS was then sold to the East Tennessee, Virginia, and Georgia Railway, and the Richmond and Danville Railroad, which later became part of the newly formed Southern Railway in 1894. This also included the C&O and TP. Then, in 1892, the AGS acquired the Gadsden and Attalla Railroad, which ran in between its namesake cities. But in 1905, the AGS then sold the railroad to the Southern Railway, only retaining trackage rights across the line. Then, in 1909, AGS gained half interest in the Woodstock and Blockton Railroad, and gained access to West Blockton. Then, in 1914, AGS decided to incorporate the Wanacheni Extension Railway, which was a short section of track that ran in between the AGS main line and to the Southern's newly acquired Memphis-Chattanooga main line. The WER was later acquired by AGS in 1917. Soon, the end of the train came up. We decided we wanted to pace this train since the excursion wasn't due to leave for a while. We will be pacing the train along Highway 11. As we were leaving town, we saw this chassis system caboose on display at a park, as well as a southbound freight train. Getting back to the AGS, in 1969, just before Southern acquired a majority interest and total control over the railroad, AGS merged the New Orleans and Northeastern Railroad into their system. The New Orleans and Northeastern's control was sold to the Southern Railway in 1916. In case you're wondering what happened to the 2 Vicksburg lines, they were later acquired by the Illinois Central in 1927.
Wait a minute.
The final expansion for AGS came in 1993 when the railroad absorbed the Chattanooga Terminal Railway, the Louisiana Southern Railway, and the New Orleans and Terminal Company Railway.
Hey, bro, do you mind if I wheel down
Interestingly enough, both the Alabama Great Southern and the Cincinnati, New Orleans, and Texas Pacific Railroad were considered Class I operations in their own right, until corporate simplification took effect. Also, just like the Rat Hole line, AGS still owns the lines NS uses today, making AGS a paper railroad. A paper railroad means it only exists on paper and has no rolling stock or locomotives of their own. They only own the right-of-way in which NS uses today. Now that we have reached the front, let's watch 8711 pull its train northward along the AGS main line. then drove ahead of the train to catch it at the Greenwood Road Highway 11 intersection, where a small railroad crossing that led into a field was. We then pulled out of the crossing entrance to try and get back to the front of the train. As we continued our chase, the day turned from a rainy morning to a sunny but yet wet day. We then tried to catch the train at another location again, but just missed 8711 as it passed us by. We then quickly got back on the road again to try to chase the train again. After reaching Collinsville, Alabama, we then left the train in the dust and drove straight to Fort Payne, Alabama. The reason for doing so was because of the Alabama Fan Club and Museum. The museum focuses on the famous band Alabama. The band has made famous pieces of music such as Tennessee River, 18-Wheeler, High Cotton, and many more. The band's main vocalists and founders are Randy Owen, Jeff Cook, and Teddy Gentry, all born and raised here in and around Fort Payne, Alabama. They made their band a professional group in 1972, and from then onward, Alabama made it big and is still performing to this day. At the time of recording, Alabama has released their 2017 tour schedule on their website, with the first one being in Miami, Florida on March 11th, 2017. After seeing the museum, we then went to the Fort Payne Depot to catch a southbound freight train led by NS 9687, 2692, and 7715. NS 9687 is a GE C40-9W. NS 2692 is a EMD SD70M-2 built in 2005, and NS 7715 is a GE ES40DC built in 2008. We are located in the parking lot of the Alabama Walking Trail Park, just across the AGS main line from the depot. The reason why this train is going so slow is because it is entering onto the siding just south of us. It is going around the grain train we chased from Attalla to Connellsville. Once the southbound is in the siding, the grain train will be allowed to continue its northbound run. As soon as the southbound train was passed, we then moved to the depot parking lot to watch 8711's northbound grain train pass us by. The Fort Payne Depot was built in 1891 by the Alabama Great Southern Railroad. The station served passenger trains until 1970, when passenger trains were discontinued. The station continued to serve freight trains until it was discontinued in 1983. A little bit after 8711's grain train rolled out of town, a high-rail truck came through. It was inspecting the line for the excursion train's return to Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Seen like the Pennsylvania and the Conrail heritage in it.
Southern's my favorite.
Back to the train station. In 1985, when Norfolk Southern announced plans to close and dismantle the building, a group of citizens acquired the building from NS and turned it into the Fort Payne Depot Museum. It was then reopened to the public as the museum in 1986. After seeing the depot, we then went to the Alabama Walking Trail Park to catch a southbound freight train, led by NS 9695 and 1040. NS 9695 is a GE C40-9W. NS 1040 is a EMD SD70 ACE, built in 2011. After the freight train rolled on by, the excursion train then came up. After catching the train in Fort Payne, Alabama, we then drove up to Trenton, Georgia. We are located at Railway Lane near the former Alabama Great Southern train station. The Alabama Great Southern Trenton Station is now the local Chamber of Commerce and the Welcoming Center for Trenton, Georgia. The station looks pretty different from the one in Fort Payne. After a little bit of waiting, our excursion train then came around the corner.
Here it comes.
Clear both ends.
After catching the train in Trenton, Georgia, we then proceeded to pace the train along Highway 11 Birmingham Pike as it makes for the Tennessee-Georgia borderline. Soon we cross the Tennessee-Georgia border, heading north into Tennessee. After chasing the train from the Tennessee-Georgia border, we then drove back to where we began our chase from, TVRM's Grand Junction Depot. The Grand Junction Depot is the terminus for many excursions running in and out of Chattanooga, Tennessee, such as the Somerville Steam Special, the Chickamauga Turn, and many others. After getting to the platform, we then caught an eastbound freight train led by NS 8054, BNSF 4572, and NS 7611.
Here, coming back up, travel safe.
Tower. Number 9, should be on your way.
It might be waiting for this train to go by.
NS 8054 is a GE ES44AC built in 2011. BNSF 4572 is a GE C44-9W built in 1999, and NS 7611 is a GE ES40DC built in 2006. TVRM's Grand Junction Depot makes a great place to watch NS freight trains and TVRM's Missionary Ridge Local, along with many other excursions. The Grand Junction part of TVRM is open to the public, but if you want to get to East Chattanooga on the other end of TVRM's main line, you will have to pay for tickets to ride the Missionary Ridge down there. Also, the restaurant that is in the Grand Junction Depot, well, when it's open, also charges as well. Other than that, you can just hang out and watch trains roll by all day. After that train ran on by, we then caught an eastbound freight train led by NS 9555 and 8341.
That's why I made the shot.
NS 9555 is a GE C40-9W, and NS 8341 is a GE C40-8W built in 1990 for Conrail at 6098. After that train rolled on by, things died down for a little while. While we were waiting here, it seemed like the day couldn't figure out whether or not it wanted to be a rainy or a sunny day, as shown here. We then saw our excursion train backing down the main line so it could pull forward into the Grand Junction Depot platform. Soon the train came to a stop. While it was sitting there, a westbound freight train came on by, led by Union Pacific 7529 and Norfolk Southern 7106. Union Pacific 7529 is a GE AC-45 CCTE, and NS 7106 is a EMD GP60 built in 1991. While the freight train was rolling on by, the excursion train began to move backwards down the line to go past the switch to enter into the Grand Junction complex. After the freight train rolled on by, we then watch as Southern 8099 finishes its excursion as it pulls into the Grand Junction depot. After the excursion train was over, we then went back into Chattanooga, Tennessee. We first see the Delta Queen riverboat, this time in the daylight. We've already discussed about the Queen in Volume 2. After seeing the Queen, we then go to the Chattanooga Choo-Choo. The Chattanooga Choo-Choo used to be the Chattanooga Terminal Station. It saw many passenger trains roll in and out of here, such as the Queen Crescent Limited, the Tennessean, and many more. It even saw Southern Railway steam excursions pull in and out of here behind many steam locomotives, such as Texas and Pacific, 610, Southern 4501, and many other steam locomotives during the Southern Steam program. Today, the station no longer sees any passenger trains, and it's unlikely that the station will ever see passenger service ever again. In 1973, the old station was turned into a hotel and restaurant. The 24-acre complex has 2 hotel buildings, retail shops, and a tranquil rose garden. the hotel buildings are not the only things you can sleep in. You can also sleep in the restored passenger cars that are on the complex. And now we've come to the end of another Rails of the South adventure. Join us next time as we finish our trip by going up to Frisco, Virginia, Tennessee and catch trains of CSX and NS. Don't worry, it won't be the end of the Rails of the South video series, it's just the end of the trip we're on right now. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.